All right. So we have another guest speaker today, Bruce. And how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Sardi.
Sardi. I'm
Sardi.
Nebraskan, so we have our own way of saying everything. Every once in a while, like 1 in 100 times, we get the name right. So,
It's pronounced just like the restaurant in New York, which is spelled with a D instead of a T, and we are related in a distant way
okay.
to that restaurant up there, which if you're Alaskan, you may not be familiar with, but it's reasonably famous on this side of the country.
We tend to cook our own food out here in the Midwest. Like you go to New York and you try to get a steak, and Skip and I rant about this all the time because he's from Texas. And you pay like $80 for like this little tiny piece of meat in New York. And here in Nebraska, we're like eating 16-ounce, fillets, and it costs us like $5, you know, and you slap it on your back grill. So we do have a really good restaurant scene here in the Midwest. It's just different than it is in New York. There's not as many.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely different. When we've traveled out to the Midwest, we've got a wider variety of options of
Yeah,
different types of restaurants that did different things. We're over near Philadelphia, so we're not far from that area. It's a couple hours to New York, it's a couple hours to Philadelphia. Honestly, not a ton of variety. Not a ton
Denver
of variety.
scene. So does Houston. Houston has a surprisingly great scene for a variety of fusion foods. So, but the reason we came here today was like we were chatting on one of the MSP Facebook forums, the one of the business owner groups, I think, and
Yeah, one
we
of the MSP owners groups, and yeah, and I usually pipe in with my 2 cents here and there.
yeah, it was kind of hit off like this concept of treating customers like people. And we thought, hey, let's make a podcast episode out of this. This is a great conversation. So here we are. And it's gonna be a two-parter. One is we're gonna talk about like why don't MSPs and security companies treat their customers like people. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just we've kind of devolved to this, for lack of a better term. I hate using that word because it doesn't make any sense. But this idea that we backslid into this, we started off solving problems for customers, and now we present customers with pre-built solutions to problems that we create without understanding who they are. And why do we do this? We walk in and we've got the exact solution they need. They need this firewall because the other one is old and this one has so many more new features to it. So I'd love to
That
get your thoughts there,
that
Bruce.
might be one of the best little explanations of everything we do wrong as an industry, right? We walk in with a solution to a problem they don't know they have, right? I mean, like you said, the firewall one is an excellent example because I've walked into, and I know I'm not answering the question, but I've walked into offices and presented whatever the plan was or the presentation, and I said, well, we had so and so in here 3 weeks ago, and they wanted to sell us this, and this. And I said, well, why? And they said, we don't know. They just said we needed it. I said, well, I don't think you need it because, and he, and 9 times out of 10, the explanation is because what they suggested will do this, and this, and you only do this first part. You don't do the other two parts. So you don't need that. You need this instead because this meets your needs today. And as we talk more in the conversation piece, I've learned that you're not ever going to do that other thing. So why would you
Mhm.
spend money on it? So you craft that solution through the relationship that you've built with them because it meets their needs as opposed to, and I hate to say it this way, but as opposed to checks the box and the best practices pieces of paper. Because
Yeah.
best practices are our worst enemies sometimes as professionals.
Yeah, I mean, we get that question a lot. So our software is all about client engagement. Like, how do you talk to your clients and what do you talk to them about? And people are like, well, how do I automate this so I can make sure that I'm checking these boxes and like that? Can I just send this to my client? Like, do you not want to talk to your client? Well, if I can just automate, then I don't have to go on site and I can save myself time. Look, okay, operational efficiency is great, but why is it the only thing we focus on?
Because it
And
because it saves us money. That's why. It saves
Yeah.
us money, but and I'm going to take the extra step and say, if we're saving $1, how much of that are we passing on to the client, customer, organization, whatever, however you want to term it? How much do we pass on? Generally speaking, a lot of MSPs, MSSPs, whatever, aren't passing that along. That's profit.
Yep.
We are, and I understand why. I mean, please don't, I'm not demonizing this idea. We all want to make money, but we have prioritized the idea that we make money over providing solutions and services to people who need them
Yep.
and do not understand what we are talking about most of the time.
Yeah, and I have a rant I do quite often, and it's all about you know, I grew up in IT. Like I didn't transfer into IT from another field. And it seems weird to some of the younger people listening to podcasts, but back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, the majority of the IT workforce came from another department. My
Yeah.
bosses were secretaries. My bosses and the people that were part of the leadership came from accounting. They came from different areas of the business. They might have been ex-police officer because we didn't exist. There were no career IT people back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And because of that, the IT department had a great representation of the business because these
Yes.
people came from different areas. And then as they got replaced by IT professionals, these IT professionals were very focused on problem solving and they focused on the data center, the thing they knew, the thing that was comfortable for them. And so we just got into our own heads and we created this tight little silo where we're replacing firewalls, we're replacing PCs, and we're doing our job well. What company are you working for? Doesn't occur to most IT people.
Right. What's your business process? What's your
What-
business practice? What's your workflow?
What's the goal of this company in 2023?
Right. And
Well,
the answer can't be to make money.
I'm going to reduce downtime. Yeah, it should be make money. Like a goal of the company is
Well,
to make money.
what I always like to do with customers is say, I know you want to make money. I want to make money too. So what's your goal as an organization that is not making money? And that's usually where a lot of, and honestly, whether it's an MSP or whether it's a nonprofit that does financial portfolio management for uh, individuals who can't do it for themselves. No matter what it is, the idea has to be that there's a goal here that it doesn't actually involve how much money you make, because you don't sit at a desk just to make money. You're not sitting there just to get a check, because if you are, then you're probably in the wrong line of work.
I think a lot of corporate people do that though.
No,
Uh,
they do, but why did the company start? Why did the organization begin? We have a client that does just what I said. They manage financial portfolios for folks maybe who've been in accidents and aren't really capable of managing their own affairs, things like that. And um, those people who work there make next to nothing. They're this nonprofit that they don't pay a lot for their workers. They don't pay a lot for this. So the question is, what is your goal as an organization? Well, their goal as an organization is to make sure that their clients are capable of paying their medical bills and paying for the things they need
mm,
to exist and get the care they need in ways that, say, Medicare or other or not organizations, sorry, or other programs that the government has that helps them get the care. Well, we all know that that doesn't cover everything. So what else is there? And so they've got some financial settlement, or they've got something else that helps do those things. Well, their goal is to make sure that that happens and that these people aren't second class citizens because maybe they're bound to a wheelchair, or maybe they don't have full function of something else in their existence. Well, that's their goal, and when that's your goal, then I know I can come in and say, okay, how do we do that together so that technology isn't a roadblock, so it's not a speed bump, so it's not in your way, because technology should never be in your way. It should be an enabler, not a disabler. So how do we get you there? And what are those tools? What are the services that we can now provide that you can't hire a full-time person for?
yeah.
Or those conversations are the ones that we want to have with people. as opposed to going in there and saying, what do you mean you're still using Excel 2016? How can you be using that? You shouldn't
Yeah,
be using that. I'm going to put you on something else. But why? Just stop for a second and ask why. And there are reasons, don't misunderstand me. What's that?
because of vulnerabilities.
Well, there's well,
It's not
right, because of vulnerabilities. If you go up to Microsoft's website and get that best practices sheet and list all the problems that um, Excel M365, whatever the latest iteration of it is at the moment that you hear this conversation, and compare it to Excel 2016, you will see a laundry list of problems.
Yep.
Do they apply to your
Now,
client? Do they?
that
That's the thing.
this is where I go back to the problem, is that we as MSPs have been convinced, or as IT professionals have been convinced that we need to sell that software because of all the updates. Well, who's pushing that? Microsoft is. Why? Because their margins depend on you selling their software.
There's two sides to that.
They're going to convince.
It's absolutely pushing that idea. Because if you don't sell
Yep.
it, right? Microsoft doesn't have people who go office to office and sell their stuff. They have vendors. They have in Pennsylvania the intermediary units which work with the schools. They come in and say, well, here's the M365 package. You need this because it's always up to date, and you pay this now. Software as a service constantly. You always pay for it, and so you're never out of date. Right? That's a wonderful idea. Which it is. I mean, I'm not. I love the idea personally. That's certainly what we do. But if I am not as if I'm not making money on selling Excel or Office or whatever, I no longer have motivation to do that. We don't make money selling Office. We don't make money selling software. We don't do that. They buy it, we enable them to buy it, and they pay whatever that cost is because that takes that out of the equation for us. And that, from our business perspective, I think that's a super important piece that we make money providing services and we build value based on those services as opposed to being profit driven 24/7 saying Excel costs 199. So to you for 299 because I'm going to tell you you need it. And I'm going to make it sound so much like you need it that you'll feel foolish saying no.
Yep.
And that is something that our industry does exceedingly well.
Yeah. I think it's because like so many IT people are really smart individuals, and they're great
Absolutely.
engineers, and they're like, but they're terrible business people, and it's just because lack of exposure. Like we tend to look down on people with MBAs and with business degrees as like, oh, they're just not smart enough to be an engineer. Like, no, these are wicked smart people. They know what they're doing. They are tracking a ton of things in their mind. They just come across as not as intelligent because they don't know the technology world very well, and they don't bother to learn it because their mind is already full with the 10,000 personnel problems and growth in projection issues with the economy. That's what they're doing in their heads. And so
And we
we
are not, by the way.
as IT
We are
people,
not doing that.
yeah, we as IT people then are at the whims of people who are business savvy. And so when we've got a Microsoft, when we've got a FortiGate, when we've got vendor X, Y, and Z who is really business savvy, they've got you convinced that your margins come from their products, which is great because they win off of that, and they're trying to get you to win a little bit. But if you look back and you start putting on your business cap and you realize that if you can treat your customer like somebody you need to solve, or a situation, or they have problems that you can help them with, then all of a sudden you're not selling the software and the hardware that you've been conditioned to sell. You're now selling your services, which is so much more valuable from a margin standpoint and to your client. And so what happens is over time, well, we have just gotten comfortable with being a retailer, and retail is easy. It's a matter of math. I can look down at the spreadsheet. I can say, I got this much margin. I need to move this much product. Services, however, require relationships, and that's hard for a lot of people. So walking in, I when I was doing my pitch, one of the questions of the judges was, "How do I get the 10,000 solutions in front of the customer? How does your product do that for me?" I'm like, it doesn't. My whole point of my product is not to remove the engineer or the person from the equation; is to put them back into the equation where you have these 10,000 solutions. So Bruce has 10,000 solutions in his head from a lifetime of experience. But if you are too busy in your head, you're just going to talk about the solutions that you have been conditioned to sell. If you sit there just for a few minutes and ask your client the question, hey, what are the biggest problems you guys are having as a company? And let them rant about it. Do a SWOT exercise. It's great.
Hmm.
It's like it'll work. And you can sit there and listen to them talk, and you'll walk out of that conversation with 10 solutions that are going to make their business better and are going to improve your margins because now they're like, wait a minute. So if I gave you $8,000 a month, you can make it so that all my schools run smoothly. Yes.
Hmm.
Where do I sign up?
Well, right, but that's the conversation piece. So,
Correct.
we have always, I'm sorry, I'm overstating that. So early on, we didn't do it, but it didn't take
Always
long.
a good conversation.
Well, yeah. Well, look, man, I'll talk about anything for a long period of time. But early on, we realized that I can't talk to you about what's best for you if I don't know what you do. And because obviously you'll come in and say, okay, what are your pain points? What are the things you want to see better? And anyone will always have a laundry list, right? My laptop is slow. This is that. They'll always have this list of things that they want done. What we'll call loosely better, but they're mostly just surface complaints for a lot of folks. They're mostly just the symptom, not the problem. So we want to not treat the problem. We want to solve the problem, but we want to solve the problem in a way that creates efficiencies and productivity for your organization in a way that you may not have even thought about because you didn't realize that this was in your way because you didn't even know about it. Or maybe you thought something else was in your way, but really it's not because why are you even doing that anyway? And so through this process of coming in and spending a day, and yeah, you know what? It's a day. It's not, I'm not getting paid for it, but I'm
Yep.
going in for a day because I'm going to learn your environment. I'm going to talk to your people. We interview people who work for folks. Okay, what do you like? What don't you like? What do you do? What is your core job function here? And what do you do? What do you use to do that? We go through those processes because we've had clients that have had one office uses this product, another office uses this one, and then another one uses a third product, and none of those products intersect. None of them talk to each other, but they all have to report together. And that particular organization that I'm thinking of, they would take days to put that data together in a useful way in order to present before their board. And we said, whoa, 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 what if we could just put all that data together in one place for you? And then design reports for all of you. And then all you have to do is put it in here in this way. And then when it comes time to do that, you just click the buttons. Maybe we have to modify reports every year or every quarter or something like that, but that's like an hour of
Yep.
work. It's not days worth of work. So if you don't go in and ask the questions, if you don't spend the time to build that relationship and create a bond of trust between you and those people, because those people are going to be telling you things that they're saying words that you hear in a different way than maybe the way they say them.
Yeah.
And because it means something different. But that trust connection, 2 weeks later, when you come in and say, here's what I want to do, and they say, but why? I say, well, you said this, and this solves that, or
Well,
this speaks to that.
I think one of the reasons why we tend to do that, we come in and we solve the problem, and is that we're a little intimidated, and whether we want to admit it or not, like we are not business people, as I said earlier. And so we come in and we try to understand their business as well as they do. And we like, oh, I can't, I
Mm-hmm.
don't have time to learn all about this stuff. So I'm just going to provide solutions. And occasionally we have a good conversation. But if you start seeing the person across the table from you as an actual human being that has a level of expertise you will not achieve because you are not in their seat. And so when we hire VCIOs, when we hire these BAs within our MSPs, we try to hire somebody who has business experience. And that's not necessarily a prerequisite to be a great technical partner. You just have to have that human feel where you say, the person across the table from me has a freaking MBA. I mean, they might as well be a PhD in their field. And if I can get them to engage with me and tell me about their problems, and I say, hey, have you thought about doing it like this? Did you know you could stitch these reports together? Would that work for you? We could use some Power BI or we can do something like this. Like, I don't know how to do that personally, but we have some resources that we can tap to look into this for you. Would that save you time? You're like, oh my gosh, that would be a godsend. Here's how it needs to flow, and have them work the flow up for you. And then you go back to your BI specialist and you say, hey, can we do this? Can we stitch these three things together automatically? And the BI goes, yeah, it'll cost about $5,000 a man hour, but it'll work from then on. And the client goes, yes. So there, all you did was, to quote Office Space, you're a people person. You you take the requests from the engineers and you give them to the businesses. And it was all about listening. You didn't have to be the expert. And Skip says this all the time. You don't have to be the expert. The expert's sitting there with you. And then you're the technical expert. And now you just got to talk and have a great conversation and look at each other like human beings that have expertise in various areas rather than walking in and seeing this company as a problem to solve. Oh my gosh, the firewall's out of date. They need a new one. I know this new one's going to do these six things, but as you said earlier, do they even need five of those things? Do they even use a VPN? No.
Right.
So,
Right.
I love that. And so this kind of closes out like the first half of our podcast. I try to keep these short and simple for the drive time or for the guy who's installing the ESX server. Uh, and, you know,
That only takes about 20 minutes to install
yeah,
ESX
well,
server.
I'm old, so, back in my day, we had to do it a little bit older fashioned. But the idea is watching a blue line, listen to a podcast. Drive
Yep.
to work or to a client, watch a podcast. So, but setting up this problem of you spend a lot of time focused on the wrong thing, and
Right.
you spend a lot of time focused on technology and solving technology problems. And so, in this next episode, next week in part two, we're going to talk about how to solve business problems as a technical person. How do you start treating your client as a person? We've established that most of you treat your clients not as people, but as problems to be solved. Instead, in part two here, we're going to hit really hard on how do we treat them like people and partnerships that we can engage with. So thanks, Bruce, for coming on,
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you on the flip side.
Sounds great, Adam.